1987, the film Julia and Julia was released. The first film shot digitally, captured with a Sony HD-VS camera, and the film was then transferred to 35mm film for actual distribution. This was a first. Before that, all movies were shot on film, which involved a long and expensive process. Long after the democratization of digital cameras, film retained a very important advantage: resolution. Initially, the sensors for digital cameras did not allow for the capture of images in 2K or 4K. It's funny to think about that now with how recent technology is giving us options way beyond that. But even today, when we have an 8K or even 16K camera, there is one thing that film still continues to outpace digital with, and that's dynamic range. It's possible to capture more detail and highlights and shadows on film than with a digital sensor. In practice, this isn't a problem since during the shooting of a film, everything is meticulously controlled. And today, more than 80% of movies are shot digitally, above all for the practicality all along the production chain. Film and digital both have their advantages and disadvantages, but what we're looking at today is the aesthetic aspect, since that filmish look is one that most of us are still trying to achieve. An image from a digital camera is generally identified by its sharpness and cleanliness. Conversely, an image from film will have more character, particular contrast, texture, grain, and a subtle hazy atmosphere. The digital image is surgical, the film image is more organic. And in the same way that different film produces different renderings, different sensors make different images. So for a trained eye, it's possible to distinguish an image coming from an Arri camera, for instance, or from a Red camera. Manufacturers continually seek to create the tool to achieve the most cinematic image possible. For example, Arri has created the Alexa 65, which sensor is comparable in size to the 65mm film, approaching that IMAX standard. But how can we emulate the look of film on a digital image? To try this out, we are going to be using this clip shot with a Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro. This image is very sharp and clean, which, as I said before, is a telltale sign of a digital image. So let's see how we can take this and get closer to the look of film. Before we get into that, I wanted to let you know about a contest ShotDeck has going on right now, but instead of me telling you, I'm gonna let the owner of ShotDeck, Lawrence Schur, who's also the DP of Joker and the Hangover films, tell you himself.
What's up, Film Riot? How are you? It's Larry Schur from ShotDeck. It's ShotDeck Recreations contest time. Basically, you take a shot from ShotDeck, you recreate it. Do it as best you possibly can, and you can win $50,000 or more in prizes from incredible sponsors like Sony, Amaran and Sidus Link, Roscoe, and many, many more. Thank you. I want to see you out there. Take it back, Ryan.
There's way more details involved in the contest, and they put all that in a blog post, which you can find a link to that in the notes below. The contest ends on July 31st, so make sure you jump on that now. In our episode Color Grading 101, we explained in detail what LUTs are. In short, these are files containing instructions to replace one RGB value with another one. And with a LUT, you can change the colors of an image like a filter. You even have things like technical LUTs that are often used to preview the final rendering of the image on an external monitor during shooting. But LUTs are also used to give a look to the images during the color grading work. In this case, we call them creative LUTs. In DaVinci Resolve, you can find LUTs designed to emulate the rendering of Kodak 2383 and the Fujifilm 3513 film prints. These LUTs are designed to be applied to a Cineon image, so we must first convert our gamma to Cineon film log with a color space transform effect like this. Then we can add a node and we can apply the LUT. For example, here the Rec 709 Fujifilm 3513 D55. Your adjustments will look different if they are made before or after the LUT, so you have to be careful with your choice there. There are also third-party LUTs that help give images a cinematic look. For example, the IWLTBAP LUTs. In one click, the atmosphere of the image changes radically. You can go from a warm atmosphere with a LUT with the prefix W for warm or H for hot to a cold atmosphere with a LUT with the prefix of C for cold. LUTs are powerful and precise tools, but they are not magic wands. They could be used as a working base or as a final touch to make the general look of a project more homogeneous. It's possible to adjust the intensity of a LUT as well through the key output gain right here. But let's pause that and thank our sponsor, Printful. If you don't know, we have an apparel store with some Film Riot branded shirts and other delightful goodies like this magical little number, or two of my favorite shirts like this one and this one. We've been using Printful for all of this for years now, now, and honestly, they're the reason we were able to start selling again after stopping for quite a while, since as a small company, the upfront costs of printing, housing, and shipping the products ourselves just became impossible. But with Printful, we have this risk-free global fulfillment solution that makes it possible again. And what makes Printful so great is the print on demand, meaning your products don't get printed unless the customer purchases them, which is honestly the entire reason we were able to start selling our merch on our store again. Printful is also insanely easy to use. Like we showed in this other episode, you can create your own designs, upload them to Printful, put them on whatever product you want, get some solid product shots to display, and of course, order test products to make sure everything is up to your standards before putting it live on your store, which ours is connected through our Shopify. And merch is a great way to connect with your community. If you have a brand of some kind, merch lets you elevate what you are doing and promote your work in a really interesting and meaningful way. And if you come back into the products here, you'll see that they have an insane amount of quality products you can print on. So whether you are looking to do apparel, water bottles and mugs, posters for your film, or anything else, this really is an excellent resource to do any and all of that. So if you're looking to make some merch for your work, check out the link below and give Printful a try for yourself. Jumping back in, on the next node, I can adjust the contrast with the RGB curve. A severe contrast could reinforce the analog look of our image in this example like this here. One thing often found in cinematic looks is the presence of a blue turquoise in the shadows. The LUT Kodak 2383 does add this pretty subtly. You can also accentuate this effect with the color warper in Chroma Luma mode, then by setting the axis to around -40 and moving the center point to the left to increase the saturation of the blue turquoise in the lowlights. You want to be careful when using LUTs to make sure the skin tones stay realistic. But again, the rendering of skin tones does completely depend on the project and style you're going for. For example, in all of these scenes, the skin tones aren't natural at all, but it works with the general atmosphere of these scenes. Another detail that differentiates digital from film is the presence of grain, which swarms randomly in the image. The grain is due to that fine metallic silver particle present in the actual film itself. In digital, there is no grain, but instead we get noise, mainly due to the sensor's photosites disturbed by the amplification of the signal received when the light is low. These disturbances take the form of digital noise, and unlike grain, noise is homogeneous and made up of multiple small dots of color. Digital noise is a defect and unpleasant, and when grading, it can generate pixelation or banding, especially in gradients like skies. You can fix this pretty easily by applying some noise reduction at about 5 or 10% on your very first node. This will desaturate the tiny colored dots of noise, and the noise will then be similar to grain. In DaVinci Resolve, you can add realistic artificial grain with the film grain effect, which you'll want to do at the very end of your node tree, ideally the very last. In the settings, you can choose a type of grain from the available presets, but you can customize the parameters to land on whatever look you want. By checking grain only, you can see the grain pattern applied to the image via the overlay blending mode. You can go from a fine and subtle grain to a very textured, thick grain. There are more advanced plugins to recreating realistic grain as well, like Film Convert, which we've shown plenty of times on the show. The presets available are more consistent than the ones in DaVinci Resolve, and in Film Convert, you can manually manage the grain distribution between highlights, midtones, and shadows through the curves right here. The image softness option allows you to soften the image under the grain to have an even more analog look, like an 8mm film style. It's a great way to clean up some of that overly sharpened look. However, Film Convert is an additional plugin you have to buy, so if you don't want to buy another plugin, the tools inside of DaVinci Resolve can get you all the way there as well. Another element unique to film is chromatic aberration and other light-related imperfections. Like the halation effect, it appears as a red-orange halo around strong light sources. Technically, it's a defect, but a very pleasant one. Modern films have an anti-halation filter that helps prevent this effect, but over time, it has become a recognizable symbol of an image taken on film. And we can recreate this effect easily in Resolve through the halation effect, which we will apply to a node before the grain. By checking View Isolated Regions, we can distinguish which areas will be affected by the effect, and by default, Resolve considers a vast area, which we can restrict by increasing the threshold just like this. And by checking View Glow alone, we can adjust the intensity of the effect mainly with the spread, which you could see when I reduce and when I increase. If we put the spread too high, the halation effect will look more like a glow. If you want to take this look further and go with an older look, something more like 8mm film, we can add a flickering effect here as well. In DaVinci Resolve, you can recreate this through the flicker addition effect, which we will apply last. We'll reduce its action rank and increase its speed with 0.015 here, and in speed 2. And now we have our before and and after. But that's it for today. Links to everything in the notes below. And if you dug this episode, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when we put up more content. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.
See you later. Ta-ta.